And you also met the April 2nd meeting of the North County State Planning Council San Diego. We've got that in my presentation that actually each of you can take back and add into your own planning world, have conversations with your clients about philanthropy and charitable giving. We've got 4 great panelists from different disciplines, so you'll have a chance to learn a lot from them. We've got a great session today. First up, we have our nonprofit spotlight. Heather Disher, Director of Advancement, and Christina Ferranio, CEO of the San Diego Children's Museum. There's flyers out there that you should pick up, but if you all can come up
and do your thing. He's the expert.
Do we have a clicker thingy? Or do I just give them the eye? Yes, please. Good morning, everyone. My name is Heather Disher. I'm the Director of Advancement at the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum. Thank you all for being here. And then I also have my colleague, Christina.
Good morning, Christina Ferranio. I'm the CEO of the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, and thank you so much. We'd love to share just a little bit more about what we do.
All right. Well, first of all, have any of you been to the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum? We're located up in Escondido. Hopefully a couple of hands are going up. So thank you all that have been there already. To give you a little bit of an update on who we are, what we do, and why we do it, and why it's so important. We are a children's museum. We're located up in Escondido, like I said. We serve about 100,000 children annually. And we do that through a physical site. It's about 13,500 square feet, but we also have a mobile fleet of vehicles that allows us to go out to schools, early education centers, and libraries all the way across the county and impact students there. Our focus is heavily on access more than anything. So we're working with, when you think about a museum, museums that I've experienced are usually hands-off. You don't touch, you watch and look and explore it that way. Exact opposite, or what you're going to experience with us. When you walk in the door, we're going to be saying, please touch everything, please explore, please imagine, please be creative, is what the experience will be when you walk through our doors. Everything on our floor, we focus on early education. So our target age is anywhere from 0 to 10 is what we say. But really a heavy focus on the early education ages. So probably our sweet spot is up to the age of 7 or so. And then from there, we integrate STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but also through the pathway of play, because that's essentially how children learn. And then we also integrate social emotional learning. It's critical for a child's early development to focus on those very early social skills, problem solving, and whatnot. So those are all things that we integrate very early on in the child's life. So the first thing I'm going to show you here is just our mission statement, because I hope it inspires you to smile a little bit. We sparkle love of learning so that all children can discover their wildest dreams. And what we hope to inspire with that is children to be lifelong learners, to be interested in learning and never stop with that. Our vision is to be, our vision is to be the leaders in inventive early childhood education. And that's really for us to be hopefully be a model for early educators or organizations or institutes in the early education fields.
Okay, so, but we know that you might think of a museum as a play space, and we've just shared that you can come in and touch, but we want to know that our work is embedded here in a really critical need, and that is that early childhood education is not the same for all children throughout the county or throughout the the rest of the country. And so we know that we have a really important role to play. You can read the statistics here, but we'll just highlight that 79% of the children that live in the Escondido area are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And we know through statistics that this is sets children up negatively as they continue on through their educational careers and into their adult lives. And so we are meeting a really critical need here in the museum by making sure that children who would otherwise not have access to this kind of early education programming are able to receive that and able to come to the museum. And to be able to touch and learn in the same ways that all children that we want who are visiting the museum are able to. That's one of the critical reasons that we exist also. We place a significant focus on early childhood education, and this chart really shows why, and I'm sure you've heard that between the ages of 0 and 5, children are learning and receiving information at the greatest rate than at any other time in their lives. This is the time where we want them to be exploring, touching, problem solving, thinking, using critical thinking, and the way that children do this is through play. So therefore, at the museum, we focus on very purposeful play during these critical years. And what we have in the museum are exhibits that are very focused on science, technology, engineering, and math, but from a child's point of view. So we're asking children to come to play, and we're really focused on making sure that we're starting to build those problem-solving skills that engineers will have in their future, but we're doing that from such a young age with those challenges that we're making them, that are asking children to think a little bit more about these, about how they too are problem solvers, even at these youngest ages.
Well, that brings us back to who specifically we're serving. Now, when you're thinking of a museum population, a lot of the time, you're not thinking it's always accessible to young families. So where we're located in Escondido, we live in an economic opportunity zone. Many of the families that we're working with walk to us because they don't have a means of transportation. Many of the families are utilizing public transportation, so we're in a really central place that makes it easy for them to get to us. We're the only educational opportunity oftentimes that families experience on a weekly basis. So you'll see just half of our visitors, nearly half of our visitors on a daily basis qualify for a program that we call Access for All. And that's simply showing an EBT, SNAP, WIC card, whatever it may be, that shows some sort of financial barrier. Immediately, we discount admission to $1 for those families. That's half of the families walking through our doors every day. And then to meet the needs of those with transportation barriers and allow access for schools, 90% of our visits that we're seeing through our mobile fleet of vehicles are going out to economically disadvantaged schools, libraries, and education centers. So access is just really the backbone of what we're doing and the audience that we're serving.
All right, so just to give you a quick sense of our priorities in 2024, we've got new exhibits coming to the museum. And so that's always exciting. We want to keep the learning fresh. We want to keep families coming since we serve ages 0 to 10. If you've come and seen us when you brought your 2-year-old, we want there to be something new and exciting when you bring your 8-year-old. We also are embarking upon expanding our mobile and continuing to grow our mobile unit and continuing to reach more schools throughout San Diego County. We also are, we're doing facility improvements because we are an old building in Escondido. We're always, that's something that's always happening, but a lot of that is happening in 2024. And finally, we're going to be going through a rebranding process, updating our website and also changing our name. It's very long. You've heard us say it to you a few times today. We're going to be looking to make a little shift in that regard. So those are some of our current priorities, but then also we wanted to share how you can help and how you can spread the word. So these are just a few of the ways that you can volunteer with us through board service, through coming to the museum. We are always welcoming volunteers through contributions. As we shared, our Access for All program, it's all subsidized through the generosity of contributors to the museum. And then also through connections. We are in Escondido, but we are really trying to expand really significantly. So if there are ideas in other parts of our county in ways that you think that we can connect through the priorities that we've shared with you today, do let us know. That's a really wonderful service that you would be able to provide.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. What a great presentation. Thanks to John Kramer for suggesting this group. He and his family support them. and really open to all of you that attend. If you have a nonprofit that should be spotlighted, certainly let me know. Certainly want to recognize R.J. Kelly, who made the suggestion that came out of his MDRT bi-monthly program. So thanks for the idea. How can we help our charitable organizations? We're keeping this all moving. Pete Tentler is our master networker. He's going to grab a bowl. I'm going to do the talk, Pete, and he's going to grab cards from each of you. For the Zoomers that are in, email me if you'd like to be included, and we'll pair you with 3 other people or 2 or 3 other people not in your area of work. And it's a nice chance to get together for breakfast, coffee, dinner, what have you. We're trying to foster the deeper relationships, which really is the key behind working with everybody. Just quickly going through some upcoming presentations. April 11th is the start of the Jewish Community Foundation's Trusted Charitable Advisor Program. There's flyers out here. This would be a great supplement to your the presentation today. May 7th, which is the first Tuesday of the month for the council. We have Rebecca O'Toole and Sarah Pike of Withers Bergman presenting on California's new directed trust statute. May 16th, we've got Rady Children's Hospital's Professional Symposium with Robert Kirkland, my good buddy Tom Rogerson, talking about legacy planning. Flyer out here. May 30th, the council has a social event with Aspirient. More to come on that. June 4th, we've got Thomas Pawlowski of Bernstein talking about planning under the current economic conditions of the country. Without any further ado, I want to bring up Corey Grant, Master Moderator. Great at asking pointed questions or follow-up questions and keeping everything moving. So thanks so much, Corey.
Awesome.
You got it.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. Well, I'll use the mic. You know, sometimes my wife says you don't need a microphone. Your mouth is big enough. But welcome this morning. What we've got today is a presentation and a challenge for how do I use the. Okay, today we're going to talk about how to have the conversation. Not about, you know, charitable trusts, techniques, things like that. That might come up in some of the discourse, but really today the focus is how to have that conversation. And so we've got there we go, not a problem. So there's really kind of 5 or 6 things on the agenda that we're going to focus on. And philanthropy in the practice, developing a dialogue of trust, being a good listener, creating relationships and understanding a way to start the conversation. So a lot of this is going to be brought to you. My job here is to kind of keep things on track, take questions and so forth. We've got 4 really smart people here, both from the advisor side and from the charity side, that are going to be presenting things. We've got first Sharlene Wollach from the Jewish Community Foundation, the Chief Impact Officer. Sharlene has a number of years of expertise in planned giving and is well-versed at how to have that conversation from the internal side, outside facing donors, clients, advisors. Next to her, Jenny Bratt, partner at Shepherd Mullen, estate planning attorney extraordinaire. She'll be talking about this from the estate planning attorney standpoint. The thorn among roses here is R.J. Kelly. R.J. is the chief visionary officer at Wealth Legacy Group. Over 30 years of experience in having that conversation from a financial perspective. Also joining Anna Diaz, partner at Corient. Anna's a CFP as well as a certified exit advisor. She'll be talking about this from an asset manager standpoint. So we've got 4 really good folks to give you a broad perspective from a number of different focuses. And again, the focus here is how to work there we go. I love this. Okay. Not a problem. Okay. So this is really, I thought this was kind of an interesting statement. Advisors are influencers. You really don't know how much you have an impact on your clients until you really sit back and sometimes it comes to you empirically. I had an experience when during COVID, I separated from my partners amicably. Everybody's good, you know, they're friends from college, but in the wake of that, I had 4 of my clients call me and say, "Hey, what are you doing? I want you to be on my family office, either advisory board or a trustee." And so that's kind of, you know, I still do what I do, the advanced life insurance stuff, but the family office has really been interesting. And so you really don't know how much your clients appreciate you until you have something like that come up. So take the time today to listen to the folks, and I'm going to pass this on. I'm going to hand this to Sharlene on the off chance that it might work. Take it away. We'll have questions throughout. If you have questions, please raise your hand. We'll try to keep this succinct and online, so everybody's out of here by 9 o'clock. Those who want to stay, obviously you can. So with that, Sharlene,
Thank you.
off to the races.
Good morning, everybody. As they said, I'm Sharlene Wollach, Chief Impact Officer at the Jewish Community Foundation, and I hope today will be more of a conversation than just the providing of information. And thank you to my colleagues to be here with me today. So first of all, I don't believe that everybody who's an influencer lives on Instagram. The previous slide showed that. I believe the influencers live in your offices, and I cannot stress enough about the impact that you have with your clients. Remembering that clients want to know 2 things. They want to know that you're taking care of the value of their trust, the value of their retirement plan, the value of their current assets, and they want to make sure that you're taking care of their values for them personally, the values that they're going to share with their next generation. And if they think that you can balance both those parts, then they know that you're there not just to manage their money, but to manage their life along with them. So one of my roles at the foundation, as Bill mentioned, is to run the Trusted Charitable Advisor Program. And yes, there's brochures up front, but that's besides the point. What's been important for me over the last 8 years is the amount I've learned from the participants that come to that program, who tell me they participate because they love to include philanthropy in their practice, but they're still struggling with how to have the conversation. They're still struggling with how far shall I go in that conversation? Is it all my responsibility? Is some of it my responsibility? So I think what you'll gather for the first few slides today is how can you do it? Why should you do it? Why is it important? And then with some of my colleagues, we'll talk about, actual examples of when you can do it. So there's lots of studies that demonstrate there is a bit of a disconnect between clients and the advisors and how they perceive their philanthropic interests. So with the Giving USA study, the US study of high net worth individuals, certainly anecdotally, the stuff that I've learned with the individuals I've worked with, either the donor side or the professional advisors, it's very evident there's a bit of a disconnect. And I think if you can see the lower left graph that is on the slide, you will notice that when asked in this study to the advisors, why do you think individuals want to participate in philanthropy? 46% of advisors thought it was to reduce taxes. Whereas when they asked the same question to individuals, only 16% of them said it was to reduce taxes. Now we know, and that's sort of like a pie in the sky, oh, sure, they don't want to do taxes. Yes, they want to take advantage of the tax opportunities, but it might not be their first motivation, because there are many individuals who might not be even in the high net worth category who care deeply about the community and want to participate, but they don't know how to do it, and they don't know if they can afford to do it. And they certainly might be worth more in their estate planning, in their charitable estate opportunities than currently. So we have to look at that as a spectrum to say, what's motivating individuals? How are they connected into community? So I think that's a very important piece. We also know that advisors have recognized clearly, and you can see by the statistics, that they think it's an important conversation. Clearly, we think it is. But how do we do it? The other disconnect has been that when advisors are asked, how, and this was done by Dr. Russell James. Many of you have heard him. He was one of the speakers here previously. He did a survey and asked advisors, how often do you bring up philanthropy with your clients? And a little over 60% of them said all the time. The same question came to individuals to say, how often does your advisor bring up philanthropy? 60% of the time they said they don't. So there's a disconnect. What the difference was is when followed up with that question to say to the clients, why do you think that is? They say, oh, no, actually, we do talk about it, but only if I bring it up. Right? So the advisors, well, we talked about it, but who was the motivator? Who sparked the interest? Who was the conduit to the philanthropic conversation? In most cases, it came from the clients in this particular scenario. All right, we'll try to see if this works. Next slide, please. All right. So we know clearly that clients want it. There's lots of statistics that demonstrate that. But how do we do that? How do we get them involved in it? How do we connect with them? How do we ask the right questions? Well, here's some ideas for you. I think about this notion of the triggers, right? What are the triggers for the conversation? In the beginning, we talked about what triggers you can look out for. So the kind of thing that I've noticed, people will say, I can't come to that meeting because I have a board meeting. And advisors or the schedulers will say, oh, okay, what about a different day? That's not an answer that will always be so well received. Yes, we can make a different day. Say, oh, you're on a board? What board is that? What do you find interesting? Can we talk about that? Would you like to include those people in your plan? Oftentimes I'm dealing with donors who say, I didn't know I could do that and leave something in my IRA. We'll talk about IRAs later. We're not going to talk about techniques today, but it's a big conversation, right? We want to make sure that we say a trigger that says, what about if somebody's bringing to a complaint and they say, oh, I can't stand my accountant. They make me bring all these receipts for all these things that I do. And I'm very charitable, but I have lots of small receipts. Well, that should ring a bell in your head that there's another option, even if you're on the estate planning side. And conversely, if you're on the financial planning side and somebody says, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do with my trust because I don't know how to divide it up with my kids and the organizations that I care for, don't know what to do. So what we do at the Trusted Charitable Advisor program, and what you're doing here today and what you should do out as much as you can, is to engage and network with colleagues in different disciplines so that you can balance the holistic responsibility and the holistic relationship with the client to make sure that they're getting their values as well as their value managed. Oh, the other thing is one of the triggers, I think, from a financial planning point of view is oftentimes, and now, of course, the rules are changing every year, but somebody might say, you know, I'm worried because my friend told me now that they're taking their required minimum distributions, they're paying taxes on that. And it's putting them in, it's affecting their AGI, and it's putting them into a different tax category, and it's cascading into other impact. And they're thinking about that before the actual event occurs. So that's another trigger to have a conversation about how philanthropy and charitable planning can be included in that process. So planning ahead is really important. Inherited IRAs are a big conversation, right? People don't realize the current rules about inherited IRAs, that they may not need the money. Remember too, and I might mention this again, so forgive me if I repeat myself, but inheritors today are not the inheritors of yesteryear. When we talk to our clients about who they're leaving money to and their assets to, oftentimes it's not the 20s and 30-year-olds. It's the baby boomers. It's the 60-year-olds, and in some cases, even 70-year-olds that I'm working with. They suddenly get this inheritance from family members who are living longer. Clearly, they're living longer. And now they have the situation, they say, but wait a second, we prepared our whole lives for our own retirement. Like, we're fine. We don't actually need this extra money. And great, our kids will get it, but what are they going to do with it? They're going to spend it. This is what they're going to do, unless we prepare them for that philanthropic engagement so they can do both. So they can spend it and they can make an impact in community. And how do we transfer that information to the client? Will we bring it up before they do? You know, when the time comes and X will happen, here's some things for you to think about. And how can we include your kids who are now in their 60s in that conversation, and maybe even their grandkids or other family members? It's also particularly evident when people do not have children. I often meet with clients as donors, and so, by the way, everybody, Ollie, Ben, Ollie, where are you? There's a terrible glare, I can't say. Ollie over there, if you don't already know Ollie, he works with me at the Jewish Community Foundation, and he will recognize this as well. We have individuals who say, I have no kids and I can't even get through preparing for my trust because I'm nervous. I don't know who to give it to. What can I do with that? I'm happy to give it all to charity. And we think that's awesome, of course. But we also think people should get engaged in community in different ways. So I often will speak to donors and say, is there anybody important in your life that you'd like to include? Because I think it would be great. And how can we help you navigate, if there isn't, or even if there's a portion, how can we help you navigate, including charitable planning in a way that's impactful and meaningful to you, not just after your lifetime where you won't literally see the work and the impact, but how can we start engaging you now during your lifetime? You know, we call charitable estate planning a way to honor your lifetime of giving. It's not a way to honor your death. And people recognize that. They can feel that. If you start talking only about what's going to happen when you die, they're going to not want to talk about it. But if you start talking about how can we work a way for you to live philanthropically, how can we make a way to live charitably and engage in community, that will engage them. Okay, let's move on. Sorry, just jump in as soon as I have 2 minutes, would you? Okay, next slide. Where am I at? Okay, where do you start? Back one. Yeah. Right. So this notion of where do you start? First of all, by attending these kinds of programs and others, you will gain knowledge. I suspect that many of you are already engaged in this work. That's why you're here. Generally speaking, I find when I do these classes or lectures, it's to people who are already engaged in philanthropy or already care about philanthropic process. I bet many of you already sit on boards. In fact, by a show of hands, how many of you are already engaged in some sort of community organization or nonprofit? Right. I rest my case, Your Honor. Okay. All right. And then, of course, we want to try to include a community foundation or other partner because at the end of the day, you're experts in what you do and they're experts in the community what they do. And building a partnership is not a competitive environment, but a cooperative environment. And the client will feel like you have another tool to provide them in their process of discovery and their process of engagement. And you can choose to do nothing. And I would suspect that that's the least fulfilling of your work when you do nothing. Next slide. Where are we at? Okay. Decade of legacy. Yeah. Okay, so I just mentioned about the legacy conversation. I'm going to leave that to some of my colleagues, but what we do find is the same thing occurs with legacy conversations. To start a conversation, whether you're in the financial planning, wealth management world, or whether you're doing the trust planning, having that conversation is really critical because it helps people bridge, as I said, bridge the lifetime of giving into that which they're going to plan, which is a matter of passing on their values to the next generation or to their community. And in that way, advisors who are in the wealth management and financial planning side should be asking the questions. Do you have, and I think many of you already do this, by the way, do you have a trust? Is always in a discovery document? Is it current? When was it last updated? Very few people ask, have you included other charitable organizations in that trust written? Right, let's put that to one side. And meantime, I'm the wealth manager, financial planner. I'm the custodian of an IRA, other retirement plan, and I noticed that they're giving that all to their kids. Well, that should be a trigger for you to say, wait a minute, hold on a minute. If you're holding, if you've earmarked money for charities in your trust, but I know you have an IRA, let's have a conversation with your attorney to make some adjustments, right? We know that that's an opportunity to change. Conversely, in the trust planning, in the estate planning, asking the client if you have an IRA is oftentimes in the discovery document. Tell me about all your assets, even if they don't sit in the trust. But who is the beneficiary of that IRA? Have you looked at that form recently? You filled it out when you first went to work, or your 401k or your 403b, and that was 25 years ago. Let's make sure that we communicate with both disciplines to make sure we're balancing and putting the charitable planning in the right bucket. So that often is an opportunity in legacy. So I'll pass on this one. These slides are all available to you, both in print or at the front if you don't have them, and also Bill will make them available. And then just the last slide really quickly, please. Thanks. I just want to bring the attention to this slide, which I think was so meaningful and actually was presented by Texas Methodist Foundation. I think it's important for us to recognize that we need to talk about these values. I keep talking about this notion of addressing values because clients feel when you're genuine. Clients can feel when you really care. And clients want to know them and the next of kin, so whether it's their children or grandchildren, want to know that you care about the whole family and what that value system is, because that will allow you to maintain that relationship with the next generation as well. So together with that and the notion of being able to create a legacy and what will that legacy look like for individuals, Then you get into the technical side. Then you get into what tax advantage. Then you get into what vehicle would be best. And we've deliberately tried really hard today not to talk about the vehicles and not to talk about the technicalities, but all of us are, of course, available to help you think about those. And even for us at the Community Foundation, we are not financial planners. We're not legal experts. Well, we think of ourselves pretty smart, but not as like you guys. But we have experience to see what other people have done. So we're like a research pool, right? We said, well, you know, we had this really complex asset that was given, and here's how we managed that, and here's how we facilitated it, and here's how we made it meaningful and impactful. Let's have a conversation. So we join in with our professional advisors in three-way conversations to make that happen. So I'll leave it at that and hand over to my
Perfect
colleagues,
timing.
whoever's next.
Look-
Did I do it right there? Okay.
Yeah, I think, so just to summarize, thank you, Charlene. I think that was a really good overview. I think the key takeaway from what Charlene was sharing is be a good listener and then educate yourself as to which assets are good for charity, which assets are good for family. And, you know, that can be as simple as taking a client's net worth statement and, you know, listing 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. Now we're going to get into a little bit more interactive part of the presentation. I think Anna's next, going to walk us through some case studies, and again, not really focusing on the technique as much as how philanthropy was brought up during that discussion. Anna, please.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me? Good morning, and thank you, Bill, and to the council for having myself and our colleagues to talk about the super important topic. And it's taken some work, as you can tell, for us to not talk about strategy, right? That's where we all spend time in, but we're really going to try to spend time talking about just the art of the conversation and what that looks like. And so I'll cover 3 case studies relatively quickly. But just to give you some context, a couple years ago, my partners, Hope Carlson and Matt Adams, and I kind of sat down. We're having these conversations around philanthropy pretty organically with clients, but wanted to build some process. And why it was so important is that, and those who definitely embark on these conversations, they're very nonlinear, right? They don't kind of go, we start here, we talk about philanthropy, and we end up here. They're really nonlinear, and it's important to create space for those open conversations. And so you'll see some of those themes in these case studies. The other kind of key theme you'll see, and Sharlene did a great job highlighting this, is that to us, you know, legacy and philanthropy are so inextricably connected, right? They're just so connected. And so it's such a natural conversation to get into. So let's talk about case study 1. We can go into it. So this was a couple in their 50s, real estate related wealth in their case. They were both charitable in their company. So they were giving as an organization. They were also giving as a family, kind of giving in parallel. And they had 4 adult children, 2 are married, and they had 2 grandchildren. And really where it started is they said, well, we have this, and it was really economics. They said, we have this limited LP interest. We want to gift this to an organization we care a lot about. It's got debt, it's complex. We kind of worked through that, but we then asked, would you be willing to step back? And we ask a little bit more questions around just the vision of the gift. What's really important to you? And they said, sure. So we started to ask some questions, and one of the questions we asked was, can you describe what success really looks like for your family? And the reason why that question surfaced was because they had 2 children in the business, 2 children outside of the business. The 2 children in the business were involved to some degree in the structuring of this gift. 2 were involved not in the structure, but the connection to the organization. And they said, you know, we realize now we have been giving, we give in the company, we give as a family. We really don't have a design of what we're really trying to do here. And well, we said, you know, tell us more. And they said, well, we're recognizing we've been a family business for so long, but now we know 2 of our kids are committed to the business, 2 are not, and that's okay. But the 2 that aren't are connected to our philanthropy, our impact. And so to us, that's kind of the glue that we think could keep the family together. And so we said, oh, so you're saying philanthropy is really the unifier, that's really that you're trying to connect. And they said yes. And so we said, okay, well, let's talk about that further. And they described and said, well, we asked, what challenges have you faced as you've done some of this giving? And they shared 2 really, I thought, fascinating anecdotes in this. And they said, well, one, we get approached a lot. I'm sure your clients experience that, right? Once you're kind of on the radar, you get approached a lot. And they said, it's been hard for us to really say no. It's been difficult. We have a lot of friends who are philanthropic, they have their favorite organizations, but we really care about these particular causes, these particular social issues. So we thought, okay, well, then there's an opportunity to have a family strategy around giving and maybe kind of a core mission, because it's a little easier to say no when our core interests, someone asks you, our core interests as a family are A and B, that doesn't happen to fall within those core. It's a little bit easier to have those conversations. The other thing that they described in this dialogue, they said, now that we started to get our kids involved in this charitable kind of vision, we're hitting we're kind of butting heads a little bit. And well, so let's describe, tell me what's going on. And they said, well, our daughter really cares about animal welfare. And I vividly remember this conversation with Mrs. And she said, but Anna, there are homeless children in the world. And I'm having a hard time thinking after we're gone, all of it's going to go to to animal welfare. Now, that was just their personal view, but that created really good conversation to say, okay, well, let's now really take some time to design a really family designed charitable vision. And not that everything has to go completely to what the Mr. and Mrs. were wanting, but really that they could be involved too, and maybe have some maybe smaller allocations, but still committed allocations to those, to the next generation. So truly, economics did spark that discussion. It really did. But really intention is what created kind of vision for that family. Let's talk about the second case study here. So this is another couple in their 60s, biotech related wealth. We have a lot of biotech related wealth here in San Diego. 2 adult children, 2 grandchildren, and they've been giving. I'm sure many of us see this. They've been giving through their donor advised fund. They volunteer. They serve on boards, as Sharlene described. And so through some financial planning that we do, and through that process, we do highlight at each of those kind of analyses, we say, what is the potential inheritance value for those children and grandchildren? And they'd seen that for some time. But as we know, our clients go through different chapters in their lives. And I think this chapter, when we did this last update, it kind of dawned on them, both their wealth had meaningfully increased, but they said, gosh, that number is a little jarring to us now. How much is going to our children? To their credit, they became quite self-reflective and said, we want to think about this more. I don't know about you guys, but here I feel in Southern California, we have a fair amount of, I'm going to call first generation wealth. Our clients are the ones in many cases who have built wealth, so they never came from it. So they're grappling with these issues that they didn't have to deal with, right? It's a very new territory for them. So they read, we had this conversation on this book called Die with Zero. Anybody heard that book, Die with Zero? It's a book by Bill Perkins. Definitely recommend. It's a short read. I don't recommend everything in the book, and it doesn't actually advocate dying with zero, but it does talk about some really thoughtful aspects of how wealth gets transferred, and what really wealth is a tool. And so they then said, we're recognizing now that the aspect of struggle in our life is what created what we built. Our children may not have the same amount of struggle. And so how do we give them some perspective? This was their feedback to me. And so we asked to expand on that. And they said, well, to us, the giving that we're doing is the only way for them to have exposure to maybe those less fortunate. And so they said, well, first, we do want to give more. And we have great people like Jenny and others who can help in those strategies. But also, we want to involve the kids more in that philanthropy, and the grandchildren, in their case, more in that philanthropy. So we discovered this is really not just a philanthropic conversation. This is a values transfer conversation. That's what they were trying to instill. And they found the philanthropy, not only did they give more during their lives, they really wanted to see some of the impact more and do more of that with their children. It really was powerful as they tried to instill those values that were important to their kids. I'm going to talk about this last case study pretty quickly. And this was another family, 3 generations here, real estate related wealth. First generation was now in their late 70s, early 80s. Second generation is who we were working closely with in their 50s, and the now third generation between the ages of 20 and 35. And they then said, we had a couple of conversations, and they said, we really want to spend some time having this kind of 3-generation meeting. And we said, okay, great. Well, tell us a little bit more about what are the ideal outcomes of this conversation? And they said, well, we want just more transparency. We stepped into this role, we being the second generation, they stepped in and we kind of had to figure it out. We didn't know a lot of what mom and dad did. We had to deal with some really difficult economic times. We just had to figure it out. And there were 4 of them. There were 4 in the second generation. And they said, we want, for the benefit of this third generation, to have more transparency. Like, imagine the power, how much maybe easier it would have been if we would have known more sooner about just all the things involved in the family and the family assets. So they said, great, let's talk about that. And they then said, well, we also want succession. Like, we need to pass this torch eventually. We want to pass the ability for someone to start to people to raise their hands and take over in this these family assets. So this meeting was had, and there were some surprising outcomes that happened in this meeting. First, it was really impressive to watch the time they spent in just describing like the rich history of this family. I think it was important to really have that historical context, and it's been told through stories within this family, but to really spend time and show the pictures and tell the stories was really neat. But what they noticed when they started to get into the business side, here's how we're structured, here's the assets, here's, the details. They didn't get as much as engagement as they had hoped. But the one section where kind of brought this third generation to life was the impact chapter, when they said, here's what we've been giving as a family. Here's what's really important to us. Here's where we're focused. And then all of a sudden you saw this third generation, raising their hands. Well, can we do, what does that look like? Can I get involved? How do I get connected? And so although they started this conversation with succession for the business, really where it led them was the impact is what was connecting this family. And they saw leadership that they hoped to see on the business side more surface on the philanthropy side, because they were wanting to step up in various kind of leadership decision-making roles. But that's where it started. That was a couple years ago. And since then, that family has built a family vision, and it has both charitable components, it's got family components. But because that initial philanthropy conversation brought them to life, that really started the dialogue. And they also said, if we're 4 of us, there's a lot more of them, right? There's cousins. And so we made decisions within 4 and, with spouses. Now they have to make decisions with a much bigger group. So I think there's some really powerful themes of where legacy and philanthropy are connected, and how we can use these conversations to have deeper dialogue with our clients on impact and what's important to them. I'm going to pass it over to Jenny, but I will say from the opportunity as we do this, it is a collaborative situation, which I love that, Sharlene gave her perspective, and then Jenny and RJ will share theirs. It takes all of us in a very collaborative environment to really support our clients in this dialogue.
Thank you, Ann. I think that's very insightful. We're at kind of our 50% spot here. Does anybody have any questions for either Sharlene or for Anna or any of the other panelists so far? Any ideas come to mind or questions, anything? John.
Sounded like some of these cases, they were coming to you as kind of host, and that third party.
Are you talking about the 3-generation kind of? It was both. Yeah, there was an intent to build succession, but they also needed some help in that conversation. I think it was both. Yeah, I feel many of our clients give us hints, that there's areas of interest, and our hope is to try to support that and bring that to life. That's a great question. I'd be curious, kind of I think often. I mean, that second case study, we've had these conversations for a couple times, but they just weren't in the stage of life where they could really give it true thought. But finally, it was there. So I think you kind of keep doing it, because you just don't know when they'll kind of ignite the conversation. Yeah, good question.
I think that's one of the things that I've noticed the most with the family offices I work with, is something that's sort of the undercurrent here is governance, having family meetings, having open communication. These are things that will allow the discussions about philanthropy to sort of bubble out of succession and other things. So, organizing your clients, getting them to have an agenda, getting them to have a specific purpose around their planning, where everybody's encouraged to communicate and to have dialogue, that really helps between the generations, and sort of that's a lot of times where the philanthropic discussion will bubble up from.
Corey,
So,
can I just
yeah,
add one thing to
please.
that? I think it's a really great question. I think when clients have developed a feeling of trust with their advisors, they will bring, having known that you care about their holistic self and their whole family, they will bring these situations to you to give you an opportunity to participate and take it down a very technical financial planning route, or one that includes philanthropy. But I think having that trust comes from very early on and consistent. I think of it like the drip system, right? Just keep sharing something every time you meet. Now, it doesn't have to be something about them. It could be something about you. I was just at this program. I came today, I learned about the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum. Did you know about that? Wow, you live in North County. That's this great place. That's about being informed and getting the knowledge for yourself. And I don't think there's a timeline of how often you should bring it up. I think frequently that you're in touch, hopefully you're in touch with your clients frequently. That's the first thing. And then in addition, if it's just once a year, a check-in that many of you do a check-in once a year, I'd bring it up every year about something. Not the question of, and Dr. Russell James talks about this, there's a huge shift between saying, are you interested in including charitable planning in this plan? As compared to the question that says, many of my clients find this an opportunity to include charitable planning in their plan. Would you like to talk about that? Two totally different outcomes, and you'll see the statistics, huge shift. I think it moves from 14% to 67%. 14% of people will respond when you say, would you like to include charitable planning? And 67% of them will respond when you say, many of my clients include charitable planning at this spot and this time and place in your value system. Do you want to have a conversation about that? So just something to think about.
Thank you, Sharlene. Jenny?
Thanks. And thanks everyone for having us here. So first case study, I have a couple married, they're in their 40s. They come into my office, and they're in my office because a financial planner, they've told their financial planner, I'm about to sell my business, and they have no estate plan. And their financial planner says, you need to go talk to an estate and tax attorney immediately. And in their mind, and I think in the financial planner's mind, it's pre-liquidity planning. Like, we're about to have this big liquidity moment. We got to do some cool tax planning. This particular couple has no estate plan in place. And off the bat, I always like to ask new clients who are coming in to meet with me, why are you here? And it's funny how many times people just kind of like look at me like, because someone I trusted told me I need to come see you. But then I like to take a step back and say, when you think about your wealth and everything that you guys have worked super hard to acquire, where do you think of it going? If you think of it in buckets, what do you think? And again, I kind of get like, just this look of like, I don't know, aren't Jenny, aren't you supposed to tell us what we're supposed to think? And I try to get them drive it down a little bit more. And I like to think of the estate plans that I do in buckets. So there's the first bucket, which is, what do the clients need to live their life, take vacations, buy things, their own lifestyle bucket. Then there's a kid bucket. Like, what are your kids going to need? Is that for college, helping your kids buy a house, maybe helping your kids start a business? Oftentimes there's also a dynastic bucket. So there's so much wealth that we're not going to need it and our kids aren't going to need it. So then there's a bucket for grandchildren, great-grandchildren, et cetera. And then I bring up the philanthropic bucket. And I try to do this in a non-judgmental way. And I guess I kind of do what Sharlene is saying not to do, but how do you feel about charitable giving? And I always caveat it with no judgment. Like, if you zero judgment, you can tell me anything, attorney-client privilege, just don't tell me you're going to murder someone, and it all will like stay in the circle of trust. And some clients say like, we zero desire, and that's fine, we move on. But a lot of clients are, and again, they're in this instance, they're not coming to me to talk about philanthropy.
But they go, well, yeah, of course, like this is important to me. So now we've added that additional bucket. And then the last bucket is the tax bucket. And so for people who are young, when I'm having these conversations, they're obviously busy. They've been working on this business. They have 2 young kids. They're almost like blurry-eyed. It's amazing that they've even carved out the time to meet with me. And it is when they're typically when they're this young and they're busy with kids and busy with the business, they don't have time to volunteer, and they don't even have, they're writing like random checks here and there, but it is when you get them to start thinking about it, it is like, well, of course that's part of our vision. But how does that work, and how do we make that happen? And what I try to do for my clients from a technical perspective, and don't worry, I'm not going to get into CRTs and DAFs and private foundations, but is to really build in flexibility. And so part of this initial conversation with the clients is philanthropy important to you? And if it is important to you, how can we build flexibility into all of the technical pre-liquidity planning that I'm doing, so that there is this possibility in the future that there can be a philanthropic part? And obviously there's sort of like upfront some tax benefits when you're going into a liquidity event. But part of what we do is put together irrevocable structures. And so, and initially, especially when you have young kids, these irrevocable structures, you're thinking they're for my kids. But there are techniques that I'll implement if clients are charitably inclined, so that we have what I call a charitable safety net, or a charitable faucet. So even within the irrevocable trusts, we can include provisions that will allow for charitable giving through irrevocable trust structures in the future. Doesn't make it mandatory. It's not locked in that 10% of this dynastic trust is going to go to charity, but there is the ability for flexibility in the future. And again, with a young couple, they're oftentimes in this situation not thinking about philanthropy, but getting the conversation started even early, and then most importantly, building in flexibility. There's a story, it was early on in my career. We had clients come to us. They had this as like a startup business, and we did all this planning, and all of a sudden the business did like 25 times X than what they even thought it would become. And they ended up having these massive trusts that were for the benefit of their children and their grandchildren. And the clients came back and said, this is too much. This is more money than we would have ever wanted our children, our grandchildren to have. Jenny, what can we do? Well, the answer is nothing. We've set up an irrevocable trust. Like, this is earmarked for your kids. We can't mess around with it anymore. So for young people, having the conversation, if it's even an interest at all, and then trying to build in flexibility so that when their kids get older, when the business has sold, that we have the ability to potentially divert some funds to organizations. Next case study, a single person, 72 years old, retired, with significant assets in retirement accounts, and 1 child. So as I'm sort of doing the intake and having these conversations, another dialogue that I'll have with clients is about taxes, but in taxes, taking sort of taxes out of the equation. So if taxes were not a consideration and you were to think about your wealth, where would you want your wealth to go? And it's sort of this like dreamland, Barbie land of, well, what could life look, what would the world look like, a world without taxes? And how can we put a plan in place, putting taxes out the door? Another conversation that I'll have, and this might make some people in this room cringe a bit, but in general, if your goal is to maximize the amount that you want to give to your children and non-charitable beneficiaries, you're gonna just don't do any charitable planning. I think there are some strategies, and if returns are great and interest rates are right, like it can end up being a slam dunk where you give something to charity, but you end up maximizing what goes into your kids' pockets. But I never want that to be the motivator, because it's based upon a bunch of projections that we don't necessarily know will turn out to be the case. And so I also like to frame that, and that a lot of times people will think that they want to give to, that they are philanthropically inclined, but the motivation is they think it's going to save them taxes. And I want to sort of redirect them, and let's not make taxes be the motivator. Like, truly, what is your legacy? Truly, what are you envisioning? And let's take the tax hat off for a second, which is hard for me to do, but I can do it. Case study number 3. This is something that comes up a lot, and I'm sure it comes up a lot in all of our matters, where clients are very concerned about the amount of wealth that will be transferring to their children and to their grandchildren. They're concerned that the wealth is going to ruin their children, that their kids won't be motivated, that they won't be productive members of society. They're worried about their grandchildren. They're worried about raising the next Paris Hilton, trust fund babies, all the things. And that is, and they're truly concerned about, we work so hard, we built this wealth. And if we just turn over and hand it to them, or even hand it to them through really carefully drafted trust structures, that they're just going to be bums on the beach. And I do have some clients that say, I want them to be a bum on a beach. I've worked my whole life and it was terrible. So I'd be more than happy of just having children traveling the world and grandchildren and serving in Indonesia, what have you. But more often than not, it's a big concern. And like, to Charlene's point, I mean, I think we try to have very close relationships with my clients, and understand not only their goals, but also what they're concerned about. And this fear of wealth ruining children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren is a major concern. And what I kind of will pivot to is how, just in the 17 years that I've been doing this, the impact that I've seen philanthropy have on Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4. And what it can do is bring families together that may not otherwise be together. And I think Sharlene and I have some sort of G2s, G3s where this has happened, where the parents have set up massive private foundations. And I think, had there not been a private foundation, the families wouldn't talk. And not that they just probably wouldn't. But the fact that they're forced to come together to carry out the mission that Anna talked about, getting not only the G2s involved, but then as they get old enough, the G3s, the G4s, bringing together. And it not only does it physically get the clients in the room to carry out grandma and grandpa's philanthropic, or great grandma and grandpa's philanthropic mission, it also has the added benefit that I've personally seen of grounding the kids, because you can have all this money in an irrevocable trust and all the privileges, et cetera. But if you're forced to sit down once a year, quarterly, and actually give funds out to the organization, you hear stories of what, and you hear impact. And in my experience, philanthropy grounds children. So again, it's not necessarily a tax benefit, although there are some, but it can also have the ability to keep the family unified, as well as to protect the kids from themselves.
I think that's a great example. And I think we've all run into situations where families are concerned about giving kids too much. And before we let RJ take over, he's batting cleanup today, I just had a quick anecdote. Jenny, your story reminded me of a family. This is a family I've worked with 3 generations down in Florida. And the senior generation, they have money you can't hide from your kids. It's like, okay. But in one of our first family meetings he said in a very Charles Barkley-ish tone, he said, "Kids, you're not rich, I'm rich." And so they instituted a program in their family business where kids had to go out in the real world and work for someone and up until they were 30. They weren't allowed to join the family business until they were 30. Now, they could shortcut that by getting an advanced degree, pass your CPA exam, get a law degree, get an MBA, lop a year off of that, and serve on a philanthropic. It was automatic. You had to serve on a board, and you could actually take a year off of that age 30 if you were an officer or a major donor. So that was one of the ways that they fostered philanthropy. And the interesting thing that came up was it wasn't so much the kids competing for get me into the business. They were competing to get their charity to be the one that the family recognized. So it was a different sort of competition that it was fascinating to watch. So that's a great story. So we've heard some case studies, examples of how philanthropy comes up in actual real life. But RJ is going to cover what I think is one of the most important parts of the presentation, and it's how to have that discussion, how to bring that up, and what questions to ask. And so with that, RJ, I'll turn it over and let you
Thanks so much.
go
Corey.
through your list.
Well, great. Well, likewise, I'm honored to be included on this amazing panel. So I'm the least important person up here, but I just want to share with you a couple of things that I have found that have made a tremendous difference in my practice. But before we do that, those of you who wake up every morning and go to work to help make a difference in the world because you have a card that says you are on the development committee, or you're on the endowment committee for a nonprofit like San Diego State or some of the others, would you just raise your hand? If you're, we've got our friends Leslie over there with the community. These are the heroes. These are the rock stars. They could be making an enormous income doing things in the for-profit side, but no, they're choosing to invest their life to make a difference in the lives of us. So how about a hand for our folks that are that wasn't. So, Ben, I used to go to these advanced planning meetings and I was the youngest guy there. And now I'm invariably the guy who's not the youngest guy there. But no one has more passion for this topic than I do. So that's where my comfort comes. One of the things, today's session actually came from a conversation that I had, won't mention any names, but I asked, he's a very esteemed estate planning attorney, so at least you know it's a he. But I asked him, I said, I'm just curious, I'll call him John. That's not his real name. John, how do you bring up philanthropy with your clients? I was just, because I wanted to learn from a master. I mean, this is a top estate planning attorney. And he goes, oh, it's RJ, I just wait for them to bring it up. I was stunned. Wrong answer, by the way, in my opinion. Jenny's so sweet. She goes, no judgment. I had judgment. Wrong answer. I happened to mention that to my dear friend Bill, and he was aghast. And then we realized, okay, step back. I've been through a 2.5 years master's program. So every quarter I would fly up for 3 days of intense training in philanthropic conversations up in Indiana. It's called the Professional Mentoring Program, and it was an amazing program. So, I mean, again, I've been very intentional about philanthropy. My life goal, as some of you know, is to facilitate $1 billion for philanthropy. We crossed 100 million in August of 2012, and we're well on our way for our second 100 million. And if the Lord grants me long life, and we're just going to keep going and get to that billion and just keep going. But I realized I've been very intentional about including philanthropy in my conversations. This list of questions here, we use them, but this is not all we do. I mean, frankly, 2/3 of my revenue comes from our assets under management. Another 20% comes from our tax mitigation work. We help clients sell their businesses and their appreciated real estate and pay little or no tax on that. So that drives our business. Plus, we also have a thriving insurance practice and life and disability. But this is very intentional. But this is only one part of, we have 14 sections of our discovery document. So when I get hired and paid a fee to do what we call a critical actions roadmap, this is just one of the 14 sections. Okay, so in our discovery document, we're getting very intentional because we want to understand what floats the boat of our clients. And trust me, not everybody answers all 10 pages of questions for us. We have a light version of that as well. But what's your process? What is your process for having not just conversation about philanthropy, but about digging into the weeds? You know, it's one of my mentors. And by the way, there's so many questions here. I'm not going to go through them all, so trust me, we'd be here till tonight. But as I was looking at some of my favorite questions, I realized like these are like my children and grandchildren. I've asked these questions so many times, or we've leaned into these questions so often that I can't tell you which one's my favorites, but let's just start at the upper left here. And by the way, quick shout out also, I love this Trusted Advisors program that Sharlene has initiated, the Jewish Community Foundation. You want to talk about, I mean, and I love the mentors in the room here are the San Diego Community Foundation. They have mentored many of us along the way, but I love what the Jewish Community Foundation does, because if you measure impact, money in versus money out, nobody does it better. I'm a chartered advisor in philanthropy. My wife, I've promised my wife and our staff that I'm not going to get any more professional credentials, at least for a while, but I'm going to do that program. That's a great one. So join me and let's sign up with that one, okay? A couple things. So start out easy. The low-hanging fruit. What charitable causes do you donate to or volunteer for? It's a natural question to ask, and then it leads right into the next one. In what ways are you giving or have considered giving philanthropically? So years ago, when I started out, you know, they say there's the 3 stages of professional practice. You know what they are? The first stage, starry-eyed enthusiasm. You know nothing, but boy, are you enthusiastic, okay? So that's the first stage. What's the second stage? Complicated sophistication. Oh my gosh, I was in that stage for a while. I'm embarrassed to say. I mean, I was smart and I wanted everybody to know how smart I was. Oh, it was disgusting. But if you hang in there long enough and keep going, hopefully you get to that third stage. What's the third stage? Mature simplicity. Starry-eyed enthusiasm to complicated sophistication to mature simplicity. That's where we can understand and have the greatest impact with our clients. But early on, when I started in the life insurance industry, before I morphed in this, whatever it is that we do at Wealth Legacy Group, but I was taught people are going to buy from you what you own. People are going to buy from you what you own. There's a Negro spiritual that says, if you would be convincing, you got to be convinced. So one of the things, I think this was brought up earlier, is families that are very successful financially, they've got a great nose, and especially you women. I'm married, and there's so many times where my wife will meet someone and she'll just say, boy, no, not trusting them. And I'll go, how did you know that? I mean, by the way, she's always right. How did you, and she's not here, but I mean, I'm telling you anyway, she's always right. How did you know that? God has just put in you women just that 6th sense that sometimes you don't even know how you know, you just know. And that's guys, we can learn a lot from you in so many ways, and that's one of them. But the point is, wealthy and successful people, they got a nose, and they can tell if somebody is just there because they're worth 100 million. So here's the thing. If I've had any degree of success in my life and career, it's because I practice what I preach. I eat what I help clients eat. So early on, I bought a life insurance contract for philanthropic purposes. I just increased it yet again last year. We've had what I call a family giving fund, technically a donor advised fund. We've had literally a donor advised fund for over 30 years. I have also, you see what are the 4 T's of charitable planning and charitable giving and philanthropy? What are the 4 T's? Treasure. Okay, yep. But it's your time. It's giving of your time. It's giving of your talents. Most nonprofits are dying to have people of your abilities and your talents coming on their board because they need smart, competent, articulate, passionate, vocal professionals like you. So it's time, it's talent, it's touch, it's our network, as well as our treasure. Treasure, cash is the mother's milk of nonprofits. If you don't bring that in, it's like a friend of mine who ran an organization, or still does. He says, I got all next year's giving I need. I need the giving this year. So the fact is we need to give money to our different nonprofits. But the point of the story is start with you. When I look back, one of my favorite questions is asking, what are experiences that you've been involved with where you've given back? And when I look back at my own life, one of my most amazing experiences is when I organized a modest humanitarian project for victims of landmines in Cambodia. What happened there? Well, it's because I heard somebody speak at an international organization talking about the issues with landmines. I'd already run 8 marathons to raise a whole bunch of money for leukemia and lymphoma research. And I'm going, what can I do to help benefit the lives of people that have been blown up by landmines? And that little voice, said, okay, you've been raising money for running. Why don't you go raise money to help people that have lost their hands or lost their vision or lost their feet? So most improbably, I decided to follow through on that. And I had the most amazing experience of my life, one of them anyway, being there and meeting children that had lost both their hands to mines, women that had lost legs. And here I came back from that absolutely changed. And who should I meet but my wife, who is a survivor of the killing fields of Cambodia, if you know that story. Sure, I thought I was doing something to give back and make an impact in the world, and I was. But the Lord had another blessing for me to come back and meet my amazing wife. So these questions are just part of my point is making and developing a process. I've got 53 seconds left, Corey.
No, you actually got 5 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you. I have a hard time saying hello in 12. The point is that for advisors, what if we have a standing commitment that if a not-for-profit brings us in to sit down and help one of their folks do their planning, any fees that are generated, we donate 20% of that back to the organization. Well, what if you did the same thing? Now we had to, as Anna can tell you, we're in a world of regulation, so we couldn't put that on paper. My compliance attorneys wouldn't let me, but we give back 20% of any revenues that come to as a referral. So what if you did the same thing? Here's things. So again, point of the story is to be convincing, start with you. Okay, what's your own estate plan look like? We're just in the process of updating our estate plan yet again. And one of the things though that we're doing is we're handcrafting a lot of the sections of our documents. Because when I'm reading various estate documents, I could rip the front page off that document and I wouldn't know who they're talking about. Now, with Jenny, she crafts these things and it's a thing of art. But most, unfortunately, of her fellow practitioners don't do it. It's just kind of an in and out. So we're taking the time to redraft our sections to talk about our kids. I have 2 amazing stepsons and wonderful grandkids, and they had absolutely nothing to do in creating, but boy, they're sure great. I'm excited because John's got one on the way.
Do you want the next slide or are you? Okay.
For our folks that are watching in Zoom land, these are in there. Hopefully you've got this that you can take. If anyone's interested in getting this electronically, send an email to info@wealthlegacygroup.com, info@wealthlegacygroup.com. That way you can get these things and you can just put them into your system. Where was I going on that one? So it put language in your estate documents that tell your family members about how crazy that you are about them, how proud of them you are. And that's why you're doing some of the things that you're doing. And in the section that deals with philanthropy, now in our case, when I have my half of the estate, my wife has her half of the estate. when I am gone, after I have my assets going, so that she gets the income stream for the rest of her life if she outlives me. But then upon her death, 10% of my portion goes into our family giving fund. So that way we can continue to give in measured steps until the money all runs out. So how are you including philanthropy in your own estate that will transfer and translate over to the clients that you work with? Does that make sense?
That's a perfect segue into the Q&A. Thank you, RJ. That was very insightful. And I think, thank you to all our panelists. I think it was a great insight into sort of how to have that discussion. And I think RJ's point of practice what you preach is very important. It's very hard, I think, to ask someone to give if you're not giving. And lead by example. Some advisors want to, they'll say, hey, let me manage your money. And I remember when I was young, I said, well, how much do you have? And you're like, oh gosh. Well, the good thing about, when you're a little bit more mature in your practice is you've looked at these different charities and you've looked at the organizations, and hopefully, your involvement in those organizations is going to be the thing that allows you to communicate with your clients about which organizations are good and which ones, they might want to consider. So just in the interest of time, why don't we open it up for Q&A? Anybody have questions? And if you don't mind, speak up. Can I take this mic to people if they got questions? Yes, ma'am.
Cheryl Dean, and with the Salk Institute for Biological. Okay. All right, I'll repeat that. Hi, I'm Cheryl Dean. I'm with the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, and I want to thank all of you for a really insightful presentation this morning. However, I do want to commend Sharlene on citing Russell James a number of times. He's amazing. If any of you don't know him, he's an attorney who specializes in really, I know this sounds like an oxymoron, but scientifically looking into philanthropy. And he's done some incredible studies. And I think it all boils down to one of the statistics that you cite about the questions and how you phrase things is making charitable giving really normative. And Jenny, I really respect you and think you're wonderful, but really how we introduce the concept of charity and what its role is in society. If you're elevating it to, this is what most people are doing, obviously people can say, well, that's great for most people, I'm not interested. And then you're like, okay, fine, let's move on. But just putting that out there is kind of like, I don't know, sending positive energy into the world. And it really does come back. So speaking from a nonprofit standpoint, we really appreciate that. So thank you.
Other questions? Come on now, they've either been really clear or really confusing. Okay, so we got a question over here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Angela Pinella. I'm with Keller Williams in Carmel Valley, but I'm on a nonprofit for the San Diego Brain Injury Foundation. Being in sales for most of my life, the conversation is the relationship. Susan Scott wrote a really great book, Fierce Conversations, and you guys all touched upon that. And just going deeper, I really love how you ask open-ended questions. I never start a question with why, and I always go back to someone's motivation. Like, how is this important to you? They may not even know what's important to them. Most of the times we don't even know what's important to us until we take time to think about it. So what you're doing is really great, and taking it deeper. Also understanding somebody's pain if they didn't donate to this charity that they're so passionate about or that they don't know about yet. And then the time frame you guys touched upon, well, how often should you follow up or talk about charitable donations? I think as frequently as possible, because that's purpose driven and part of all of our life work and mission. We just may not know it yet. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this up, and it should be part of what we're doing all the time. So thank you.
I'm sorry if I took that
from somebody, but as a fundraiser of way too many years, I remember going up to a training, and in the training, they paired us up and sent us into a room, and we had to answer the question, you have $1 million you need to give away. What are you going to give it to? Where are you going to put it? And, you know, as a fundraiser, we talk to people, we ask those probing questions, but to have to answer it became very personal. And I cried. I mean, like I got tears in my eyes and it completely did a paradigm shift. And I realized I work with a lot of physicians who are not comfortable introducing that concept at all. They think it's a conflict of interest. I've worked with attorneys who believe that kind of deep down, it's a conflict of interest. So I think if you want to develop that muscle, you need to be philanthropic. I think it's a very different conversation if you as a planner or a physician, or even if it's just a little bit, exercise that muscle.
Corey, can I just comment on that as well? So I have a client who, when I met him, he was worth about 24 million, and he's worth a lot more than that now. But he was had everything set up. He was $1 million for each one of his kids, and everything else was going to charity. Okay, great. But how are you training your boys about being involved with philanthropy? I said, I'm really not, as a matter of fact. So what we did is we set up a foundation for him. I challenged him. I said, what can you guys do 100,000 a year? And he kind of gulped a little bit. He says, yeah, we can do that. So what we did, he got remarried. And so he had 3 step kids and 3 of his own. So what we did is each one of those family members, they got to go, first of all, they got to go someplace amazing. So the first year they went to Costa Rica. They went zip lining in the afternoon, but in the morning, they sat around the table and each one of them was responsible if they wanted to participate, and everybody said yes. They were each responsible for making a choice about where to give away $10,000 that year. Each one of them, that was their assignment. But they had to research at least 3 different nonprofits at a minimum. And around the family table, they had to share about the not-for-profits that they were excited about and were going to be giving to. What my client told me after the event, because again, they did a lot of fun stuff in the afternoons and the night. But that morning, he said, RJ, it was so amazing to look around the table at the horse trading that was going on, because they said, oh, I like that one. Can I do that one with you too? So each one of the parents also, they had 10,000, and then the family had a family gift to be responsible for as well. So that's just another way of how you can inculcate put it in the water system generationally about giving. Make it something, just as Anna touched on. It's the reason why many families fail and wealth does not perpetuate generationally is because there's no shared family values. There's a couple of great books out on that. But anyway, I hope that's helpful.
Communication is really important about a family. John, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Jenny or anyone else that wants to address it. People of ultra high net worth oftentimes aren't giving because they're focused on their potential needs, their family's potential needs. And yet from where you sit, I would imagine you can see them having enough. How do you help families that have the potential to be philanthropic, maybe even have that wish, but are restricted from doing it because of their fears of there not being enough? How do you help them make that transition?
Well, first, I would say you need to talk to Anna, because I am not your financial advisor, although I am pretty sure you have plenty to live your life off of. And so I think the first step in that conversation is actually like analytics, like how much do you really need? How much do your kids really need? And run the Monte Carlo simulations, like show, okay, because most of my clients, there ends up being extra, more than they'll need, more than the kids will need. But I find it can be helpful to have a data-driven conversation. So now we have this extra. Well, what are we going to do with this extra?
I'll add one piece that we often talk with clients about is that if you have 3 kids and you have 100% of your estate and you're going to divide that 3 ways, each one gets 33 1/3. If you would take 10% of that and give it to charity, how would that affect each of your children's style of living? Would that 3.3% really affect how they live? If it would, you need to give it all to your kids. If it wouldn't, we should have a different conversation about what impact that would have on the children in terms of leaving your legacy. And it's all about legacy, right? So would there be a greater legacy by carving off a percentage of the estate to be used for community building, charitable planning, and still leave enough for your kids? Will that 3%, 3.3% make a difference in their style of living? That's the conversation. And it should be 5%, should it be 10%? We've generally found when people look at it in that way, they go, oh, yeah, right. So yeah, probably wouldn't make much of a difference. That's how we present it to them.
Thank you, Charlene. Any other questions before we're right at about 9 o'clock? So final, going once, going twice. Okay, yeah, the panel is going to stay after if any of you have one-on-one questions that you'd like to ask. But again, thank you all for your attendance, and to the panel, thank you all for the expertise this morning.
Hello, thank you so much for coming today. Our May 7th meeting, first Tuesday of the month, is with Rebecca O'Toole and Sarah Pike on the new California legislation on directed trust. Can't commend the Trusted Charitable Advisor Program, and then the Rady Children's Hospital Symposium in May also has a great legacy planner involved with Tom Rogerson. Thanks.